Alguna vez te has preguntado por qué cuando oras en voz alta sientes más paz, más fuerza y menos miedo, incluso en medio de la tormenta. No es solo fe, también hay un impacto real en tu mente, tu cuerpo y tu espíritu. Hoy vamos a hablar de una oración poderosa, dicha en voz alta, para vivir bajo la protección del Señor, y caminar cada día con confianza y descanso interior. Bienvenido a Harrigan Paz, un espacio de salud, bienestar y fe práctica. Aquí animos principios espirituales con verdades que incluso la ciencia respalda, como el poder de la palabra hablada, la respiración consciente y la calma que nace cuando confías plenamente en Dios. Quid hasta el final, porque esta oración puede marcar un antes y un después en tu vida diaria. When a person chooses to pray in voice alta, something profound begins to happen inside the mind and the heart at the same time. Speaking words of oration activates attention in a way silent thoughts often cannot. The human brain is constantly processing thousands of stimuli, and when prayer remains only internal, it competes with worries, memories, and distractions. But when the voice is used, the mind naturally slows down and centers itself on what is being said. The ears hear the words, the brain processes them, and the heart begins to respond. This is why praying aloud creates a deeper sense of connection and awareness. Faith becomes something you hear and experience, not just something you think about. The act of declaring protection in voice alta strengthens belief because it moves faith from the abstract into the tangible. You are no longer hoping quietly that God is near, you are affirming it with conviction. This practice builds spiritual focus, but it also aligns with what psychology teaches about verbal affirmation. When people verbalize positive truths, their confidence grows and mental clarity improves. In the same way, speaking words of trust and protection reinforces inner stability. Over time, this habit trains the mind to return to faith more quickly when stress appears. It becomes easier to focus on God rather than on fear. The simple act of hearing your own voice declaring trust reminds you that you are not powerless, that you are covered, and that you are not alone in what you face. This focused prayer also has a powerful effect on emotional discipline. Many people struggle with wandering thoughts during moments of prayer, feeling frustrated or disconnected. Praying in voice alta gently pulls the attention back. Each word becomes an anchor that keeps the mind present. As attention sharpens, faith deepens. The declaration of divine protection becomes more than a concept. It becomes a lived experience. You begin to notice that fear loses intensity when confronted with spoken trust. Doubt becomes quieter when faith is expressed clearly. This is not about volume or dramatic expression, but about intentional speech. Even a calm, steady voice has power. Over time, this practice creates spiritual muscle memory. In moments of uncertainty, the mind remembers what has been spoken before. It remembers protection. It remembers peace. This is how prayer in voice alta strengthens faith daily, not by force, but by repetition and clarity. Along with focus and faith, praying aloud directly influences the nervous system in a way that many people experience but do not always understand. When a person speaks slowly and intentionally, breathing naturally becomes deeper and more rhythmic. This type of breathing signals the body that it is safe. The heart rate begins to settle, muscles loosen, and stress hormones decrease. This physical response is well documented in studies related to controlled breathing and vocalization. Prayer spoken aloud often carries a gentle rhythm that naturally regulates breathing. As the body relaxes, the mind follows. Peace is no longer just a spiritual idea. It becomes a physical sensation. The protection of the Lord is felt not only emotionally, but somatically throughout the body. This is why many people feel lighter or calmer after praying in voice alta. The body responds to the tone of reassurance and trust embedded in the words. This calming effect is especially important in moments of anxiety or uncertainty. When fear rises, the nervous system often shifts into a state of alert, preparing the body for danger. Prayer spoken aloud interrupts this cycle. It replaces racing thoughts with steady words. It replaces shallow breathing with deeper breaths. It replaces tension with surrender. Declaring protection aloud reassures both the heart and the body that there is no need to remain in survival mode. This is not denial of reality, but a conscious decision to place trust above fear. Over time, the nervous system learns that prayer is a place of safety. The body begins to associate spoken prayer with calm, making it easier to return to peace even during stressful situations. This connection between prayer and physical calm reveals that spiritual practices are deeply integrated with overall health. Faith does not exist separately from the body. When prayer is spoken, it engages multiple systems at once: cognitive, emotional, and physiological. This holistic impact explains why prayer has sustained people through centuries of hardship. It brings order to the mind and rest to the body simultaneously. When someone prays aloud regularly, the nervous system becomes more resilient. Stress may still appear, but it does not dominate. Peace becomes easier to access because the body has learned the pathway. The voice becomes an instrument of calm, and prayer becomes a daily reset. As this practice continues, trust deepens naturally. The individual begins to expect peace when they pray, and that expectation itself reduces anxiety. The words spoken become familiar, comforting, and grounding. Each prayer reinforces the truth that protection is not fragile or temporary. It is constant. This awareness changes how a person approaches daily life. Challenges are still real, but they are no longer overwhelming. The heart remains steady because it has learned how to return to calm through prayer. Speaking faith aloud becomes a refuge, a moment where the body rests and the soul is reassured. In this way, praying in voice alta serves as both spiritual declaration and practical care for the mind and body. It sharpens focus, strengthens belief, and calms the nervous system all at once. The words spoken do not vanish into the air. They shape inner reality. They train the mind to trust and the body to relax. Over time, this practice transforms prayer into a powerful daily anchor, grounding the person in peace, confidence, and a deep sense of divine protection that is felt, heard, and lived every day. Fear often does not come from what is happening in the present moment, but from what the mind imagines might happen next. This is why fear can feel so heavy even when nothing has gone wrong yet. The mind runs ahead, creating scenarios of loss, danger, or failure, and the body reacts as if those scenarios are already real. Declaring protection in voice alta directly interrupts this process. When protection is spoken out loud, fear no longer remains an unchallenged thought. It is confronted with truth. The voice becomes a line of defense that stops fear from multiplying. Instead of silently feeding worry, the act of declaration replaces it with confidence. This is powerful because fear thrives in isolation and silence. When words of trust are spoken, fear loses its secrecy and its strength. The heart begins to settle, and the mind returns to the present moment. Many people carry what can be called anticipatory fear, a constant expectation that something bad is about to happen. This type of fear drains energy and steals peace long before any real problem appears. Speaking words of divine protection breaks this pattern. It shifts attention from imagined danger to present safety. When someone declares aloud that they are guarded and watched over, the brain receives a new message. It stops scanning constantly for threats and begins to rest. Over time, this repeated declaration retrains the mind. Instead of automatically expecting harm, the mind learns to expect care. This shift changes how a person responds to daily challenges. Situations that once triggered panic now invite prayer. Uncertainty no longer feels like a threat, but like a space where trust can grow. This practice also strengthens emotional resilience. When fear is addressed early through spoken faith, it does not have time to settle deeply. The moment fear appears, it is met with truth. This creates a habit of immediate response rather than delayed reaction. Instead of allowing fear to build until it becomes overwhelming, the person learns to confront it in its earliest stages. This is not denial or avoidance. It is intentional redirection. By declaring protection aloud, the individual reminds themselves that they are not facing life unprotected. This awareness brings emotional stability and prevents fear from shaping decisions. Over time, courage grows quietly. Confidence becomes more natural. The heart learns that it does not need to live in constant anticipation of danger. As fear loses its hold, a deeper sense of identity begins to emerge. Identity is shaped by what a person repeatedly tells themselves, whether consciously or unconsciously. When someone prays aloud and declares trust and protection, they are reinforcing who they are and where their security comes from. Identity shifts from fragile to grounded. Instead of seeing oneself as vulnerable and exposed, the individual begins to see themselves as cared for and sustained. This change in identity affects every area of life, from relationships to decision-making. When a person knows they are protected, they move differently. They speak with more assurance. They approach challenges with steadiness rather than hesitation. Praying in voice also strengthens this identity because it externalizes belief. It is no longer a quiet hope hidden in the heart. It becomes a spoken truth that the ears hear and the mind records. Hearing one's own voice declare faith reinforces self-perception. Over time, this practice shapes inner dialogue. The critical or fearful inner voice gradually loses volume, replaced by a voice of trust and assurance. The individual begins to respond to stress not with self-doubt, but with confidence rooted in faith. This transformation does not happen overnight, but it unfolds naturally through consistent practice. This strengthened identity also brings emotional alignment. When identity is unclear, emotions fluctuate easily. A person may feel confident one moment and insecure the next. But when identity is anchored in the awareness of divine protection, emotions become more stable. Challenges still bring emotion, but they no longer define the person. There is a deeper sense of self that remains steady beneath the surface. This stability allows for healthier emotional expression. Fear is acknowledged but not obeyed. Stress is felt but not allowed to dominate. Confidence grows not from external success, but from internal assurance. As this identity becomes more rooted, the individual experiences a renewed sense of purpose. Knowing that one is protected removes the constant need for self-preservation. Energy that was once spent on worry becomes available for growth, service, and connection. Life feels less like a battle for survival and more like a journey guided by trust. Decisions are made with clarity rather than panic. Risks are approached with wisdom rather than fear. This is the quiet power of spoken faith. It reshapes how a person sees themselves and how they engage with the world. In this way, declaring protection in voice alta does far more than reduce fear in the moment. It gradually transforms identity at its core. Fear no longer defines the future. Confidence takes its place. The individual begins to live from a position of trust rather than defense. This shift brings freedom, emotional strength, and a deep sense of peace that remains steady even when circumstances are uncertain. The human mind is constantly forming patterns based on repetition. Thoughts that are repeated often become the default response to life. This is why worry can feel automatic and why negative thinking can appear without effort. Praying in voice alta has the power to interrupt these mental patterns and replace them with clarity. When words of trust and protection are spoken aloud, the mind is forced to slow down and align with what is being said. Confusing thoughts begin to lose direction because the spoken word provides structure. It is difficult for the mind to spiral into chaos when it is anchored to a steady declaration of faith. This alignment brings order to inner dialogue. Instead of thoughts running freely in every direction, they begin to follow a calmer, more focused path. This realignment of thoughts is especially powerful during moments of emotional overload. When the mind is overwhelmed, it often jumps from one concern to another without resolution. Speaking prayer aloud brings the mind back to one truth at a time. Each sentence becomes a pause. Each declaration becomes a reset. Over time, the mind learns to associate spoken prayer with mental clarity. Instead of reacting immediately to stress, the individual begins to pause and speak. This pause creates space between emotion and response. In that space, peace enters. The mind no longer feels crowded by anxious thoughts because it has been given a clear direction. As this practice continues, inner dialogue begins to change even outside moments of prayer. The mind starts to repeat the same truths that have been spoken aloud before. Protection, trust, and peace become familiar themes in internal thought patterns. Negative self-talk gradually loses influence because it is no longer reinforced. The spoken word has reshaped the internal voice. This is how prayer spoken aloud aligns thoughts with faith on a daily basis. It does not eliminate challenges, but it prevents the mind from exaggerating them. Problems are seen more clearly and addressed with calm rather than panic. Consistency plays a crucial role in this transformation. When prayer becomes a daily habit, its effect compounds over time. Just as physical exercise strengthens muscles through repetition, spiritual practice strengthens mental and emotional resilience through consistency. Each day of spoken prayer adds another layer of stability. Over time, this consistency creates what can be described as an inner shield. Stress may still approach, but it does not penetrate as deeply. The mind has been trained to return to peace quickly. Faith becomes the first response rather than the last resort. This consistency also builds trust in the process itself. The individual begins to notice patterns of peace following prayer. This observation reinforces the habit. Prayer is no longer seen as something optional or occasional, but as essential daily care for the mind and heart. The act of praying aloud becomes as natural as breathing. It becomes part of the rhythm of life. This rhythm creates predictability, and predictability brings a sense of safety. The mind feels supported because it knows there is a daily moment of grounding. As the habit strengthens, the sense of protection becomes more tangible. It is no longer just a belief held in theory. It is experienced through daily reinforcement. Each spoken prayer reminds the individual that they are not facing life unguarded. This awareness builds quiet confidence. The day begins with assurance rather than uncertainty. Challenges are met with preparation rather than surprise. This is how consistency turns faith into lived experience. Daily prayer also creates emotional endurance. Life does not become easier, but the heart becomes stronger. Setbacks feel less overwhelming because they are placed within a larger context of trust. The individual does not carry stress alone. This shared burden brings relief. Over time, resilience grows naturally. The mind recovers more quickly from disappointment. The heart remains open rather than defensive. This endurance is not forced. It develops gently through repeated moments of surrender and trust. Through this consistent practice, prayer becomes a protective routine that shapes the entire day. Morning prayer sets the tone. Evening prayer releases accumulated tension. Throughout the day, brief spoken declarations restore calm when needed. The individual no longer waits for crisis to pray. Prayer becomes preventative rather than reactive. This shift changes everything. Life feels more balanced. The mind feels supported. The heart feels guarded. In this way, aligning thoughts through spoken prayer and maintaining consistency in practice work together to create lasting inner peace. The mind becomes clearer. The emotions become steadier. Faith becomes a daily companion rather than an occasional comfort. This steady rhythm of prayer forms a quiet strength that carries the individual through every season with confidence and calm assurance. When words of prayer are spoken aloud, they do more than shape the inner world. They influence the atmosphere around the person. Sound carries intention. Tone, rhythm, and conviction all communicate meaning beyond the words themselves. When prayer fills a space, the environment feels different. Tension softens, the air feels calmer. This is not imagination. Human beings are deeply responsive to emotional cues in sound. A voice that carries peace invites peace. When someone prays aloud, especially within their home, that space becomes associated with calm and safety. Over time, the environment begins to reflect the inner state being cultivated. The home becomes a place of rest rather than stress. This is why praying aloud in personal spaces has such a powerful effect on daily life. This transformation of environment extends to relationships as well. When prayer is spoken aloud, others may not understand every word, but they feel the tone of reassurance and trust. Children, family members, even visitors sense the shift. A peaceful atmosphere influences behavior. Conversations become softer. Reactions become less reactive. Conflict loses intensity. The environment no longer feeds anxiety, but reduces it. This is especially important in spaces where stress has accumulated over time. Spoken prayer gently resets emotional energy. It reminds everyone present that peace is possible. Over time, the space itself becomes a reminder of calm, making it easier for everyone to relax. As this practice continues, the person praying begins to feel more grounded within their surroundings. There is a sense of ownership over the emotional climate of the space. Instead of being influenced by stress in the environment, the individual becomes a source of peace within it. This shift empowers the person. They are no longer passive recipients of tension. They actively shape the atmosphere through intention and prayer. This creates confidence and stability. The environment no longer feels unpredictable. It becomes a place of refuge. This same principle applies to the start of the day. The morning sets the emotional and mental tone for everything that follows. When the day begins in silence filled with worry or distraction, the mind often carries that unrest forward. But when the day begins with prayer spoken aloud, the mind is oriented toward trust and purpose. The first words spoken shape the direction of thought. Speaking protection and peace in the morning prepares the heart for whatever may come. It is like setting a compass before a journey. The direction is chosen intentionally rather than left to chance. Morning prayer spoken aloud brings clarity. It reminds the individual of what truly matters before external demands compete for attention. Instead of reacting immediately to messages, responsibilities, or news, the person begins the day grounded. This grounding creates emotional resilience. Stressful moments that arise later feel less overwhelming because the foundation has already been set. The mind remembers the calm of the morning prayer. The body remembers the steady breathing. The heart remembers trust. This memory becomes a resource throughout the day. Starting the day with spoken prayer also improves focus and decision-making. When the mind begins the day in alignment, it is less likely to be pulled in conflicting directions. Priorities become clearer. Reactions become more thoughtful. There is less impulsivity and more intention. This does not remove challenges, but it changes how they are approached. The individual moves through the day with steadiness rather than haste. Confidence grows not from control, but from trust. As this practice becomes consistent, mornings take on a new meaning. They are no longer rushed transitions into responsibility, but sacred moments of preparation. Even a short prayer spoken aloud can reset the entire day. Over time, the person begins to notice that days started with prayer feel different. There is more patience, more clarity, more peace. This awareness reinforces the habit. Morning prayer becomes something to look forward to rather than something to remember. In this way, spoken prayer transforms both environment and daily rhythm. It shapes the space around the individual and prepares the heart within them. The atmosphere becomes calmer. The day becomes more intentional. Life feels less reactive and more grounded. Through this practice, peace is no longer accidental. It is cultivated intentionally, beginning with the words spoken and flowing outward into every part of daily life.